This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be listening. We welcome you back to another edition of the Vicar's Crossing podcast. The Vicar's Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And three guys intersect today for another broadcast. And one of those guys is one vicar. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's in London.
And vicar number two over here is Kevin George. I hang out at St. Aidan's Church in Northwest London, Ontario.
And my name is Iain. I'm the producer behind this podcast. I'm also a singer-songwriter and do other things too.
He's an amazing guy.
He's around good guy.
My kind of guy.
He's our kind of people, Kev.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. And today we have a very special guest that we'll be bringing in just a little bit. Today we're welcoming author, activist, and church planter, Pastor Lenny Duncan. And Lenny will be joining us coming up in just a little bit. We'll be talking a bit about his book and his life. And he's certainly been on quite a journey during his life. So an interesting
Amazing
chat
guy.
coming up for you.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. His book's coming out on May the 18th, United States of Grace. But for a guy who's been through so much, he's got so much hope in his heart. So we're in for a treat. Before we go any further, though, we want to acknowledge the land that we are upon. The Vicar's Crossing acknowledges that our podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenawepak, and Attawandaron peoples on lands connected with the London Township and Sombre Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to a diverse group of Indigenous peoples and First Nations, Métis, Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of this land. And we, along with all of our listeners, work towards that time when we do have true reconciliation and respect between all peoples.
And we also have some wonderful sponsors here on the Vicar's Crossing that we really hope our listeners will support and check in with from time to time. Our first one, though, is one that we hope you don't have to real soon, but if you do, we want to hold up our great sponsor, A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London Middlesex, both family owned and operated. And many thanks to Dave Mullen and the staff there, and really are great people and take care of you. So
can't do better.
Please keep them in mind. Oh, yeah.
You can't do better. If you're dead, that's the guy you want to talk to, Dave Mullen. Well, I mean, somebody knows anyway, but he's a good guy. They do good work. Both Rob and I have had to go through lots through all this pandemic stuff as pastors with people who are journeying through grief. And it's been incredible to see the way Dave and his staff have adapted and have made, it's incredible. They're doing online stuff. There's people able to come to these funerals, even though there's isolation now and an inability, right? It's incredible what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Really appreciate what they do, especially in these times,
Amazing. Way to go, Dave. Keep it going, buddy. And over to Carol Basada, who owns Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. Get yourself enough meds and good care and nail clippers and all the stuff you need. And you won't need to see Dave Mullen. You'll be kept alive by good people like Carol Basada at Hyde Park Care Pharmacy.
And last, but 100% certainly not least, because everyone here is very thankful for this specific sponsor. We want to say thank you to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. We want to say thank you to Trisha Lister for that one. Big, huge thanks.
It's also preventative. I mean, that can keep you away from Dave Mullen too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Clean those germs.
That's right.
That's right. Thank you to all our sponsors. We really do appreciate your support and what we're doing here. We should point out that a couple of us have some sports gear on today, but we're in two different kind of places. Kevin's got the Canada jersey on.
Yeah, I just,
right?
I always got my Habs stuff on. I know,
Yeah.
but they're in a bye week, sort of. They're not playing this week, and I love my country. We have lots that we need to fix around here, but I do love being a part. And I like this Canada sweater. I think it's sort of nice. But I was really excited. What really gave me, I came in here, I was a little gray when I came in, especially when I found the snow clearing company didn't do their work out here, and I had to trudge through some snow to get into the office. And I sat down and I looked at my good friend Rob Henderson, and what was atop of his head but
My
the
tiger cap.
old, yeah, baby, the old English D.
There it is, baby.
And
All right.
today,
So you know
why wear it today?
why am I wearing this, Iain? This is our first trivia question.
It's spring training.
Right. It is. The Tigers have reported to Lakeland.
Wonderful.
And spring training is officially underway. So I wanted to channel a little sunshine and warm weather that is on the horizon for all of us, and look forward to that. And so I got the baseball cap on.
That lifted my
Nice.
spirits today, I'll tell you.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we're feeling a little bit better about things,
Yeah,
as
we're
we look
cheery.
out the window and see 6 feet of snow at the end
Yeah.
of the driveway,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
my blue box teetering on the top.
Oh,
I always feel bad for those guys after a snowstorm. They got to climb
Yeah.
hills to get to the garbage.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
yeah.
So let's play our new game here on the Vickers Crossing. It's a little something that we like to call.
It's not a lie if you believe it.
Mhm.
Well, Rob, what the heck is this?
Well, it's not a lie, guys, if you believe it, is an opportunity for us to try to kind of trick the others in a lie that we may be telling. But if we are telling
I
a lie
understand.
and we believe it, it's probably true anyway.
Okay, well, I think I understand.
Are you following? Are you
I
following?
think
where
I
we're
think I
going?
got it. It sounds very what should we say? Costanzonian.
It is Costandish, yeah, very Costandish.
Costandish. Maybe
ways.
that's the right word. Yeah, Costandish.
So
It's a
Ian's on deck-
philosophy.
Ian's on deck this week. He's going to tell us a little story about himself. It's up to Kevin and I and you that are listening and watching to try to figure out if Ian is lying or not. And if it is a lie and he believes it, then it really
Well,
doesn't
no, it's
matter.
not
It's
really a
true
lie.
anyway.
Hmm.
Well, since it is spring training, this is a very topical one.
Okay.
So as you may or may not
Like,
know,
hold on a second. Topical, like we need to put it on like a cream, or?
no, like the topic of discussion.
Oh, okay. All right, I got you.
So, as you may or may not have known, I play baseball, or I've played baseball. And in my last few years, I was trained to become a switch hitter.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to pull on us, huh?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So what you're saying, and again, it might not be a lie, or it could be a lie
It's-
if you believe it, or what? How
If
does
you
that work?
believe it, it's not a lie. It's not a lie if you believe it.
If you believe it, or if I believe it.
If you believe it.
Okay, so I know you played a lot of baseball.
Mhm.
I know that you got injured playing baseball, and that
Yes.
sort of put the kibosh on all that.
Yep.
You got an eye injury. Switch hitter. And we're
do you
strictly talking baseball, right? Like you're not trying to make euphemisms about anything or anything like that.
Strictly baseball.
Okay, so strictly baseball. Then I say yes, you were trained to be a switch hitter. I'll go with yes.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you play baseball, Ian. I do remember the story of getting pegged in the eye
Mhm.
years ago. I know your dad's an umpire, right?
Mhm.
So baseball's in the family.
That's how he runs the house, Rob.
Um,
You
yeah.
go up
Yeah,
in there, and all you can
yeah.
hear is strike.
But I think being a guitar player,
Mm.
that you're pretty much committed to kind of you're either left-handed or right-handed. It's like you don't switch your guitars around. So your brain's kind of
Wired.
tuned into that, wired to that. Yeah, one way of doing things. So
That's interesting.
I think you're lying. I don't think you're a switch hitter. I think you're playing from one side of the plate, my friend, if you know what I mean.
I know
Wow.
what he means.
Well, Rob is correct. I
Oh.
was a left-handed hitter. I was not once considered to be a switch hitter at all.
Wow.
However, here's an interesting story about the guitar. Funny you bring this up. The first time I held a guitar, I turned it over the opposite direction. I held it the Jimi Hendrix way, if you will.
Okay.
And then my guitar teacher was like, "You should never ever do that ever." And I was like, "Okay."
Did your
and learned
guitar? Tell me this: did your guitar gently weep?
Absolutely. And
I
then
wanna-
yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask this. So you bat left.
Yep.
If you played hockey or swung a golf club, would you do it left or would you be right?
I would do it left. I
Really?
throw
Yeah.
left. Yeah.
Me too, Robbie.
Because I play hockey left, and
Yep.
I bat left, but I golf on the right hand side.
No,
Oh,
total.
Isn't
That's
that
maybe
wild?
that
And
may be
it's
why
because-
Rob is a better golfer than me. But
No, but it's interesting. When I was a kid and I started to play, I swung left-handed.
Yeah.
And my dad went into the pro at the golf club and said, "My son's left-handed. Can I get a club?" And the pro told him, "No. He doesn't want to hit left-handed. Teach him to hit right-handed."
it's crazy.
So they flipped me around backwards, which
No,
is why I'm
see-
a crappy golfer.
No,
If I
no.
had stayed left, I would have been on tour.
All right, got well. We could all, but evidently all three of us lean left. Let's just say that.
That's right.
Okay.
We're all leaning to the left.
We're all leaning to the
That's
left. Okay, so listen, this is Black History Month, right, guys? So we've been doing some work to highlight Black History Month throughout, and our guest today actually is incredible in light of that, just because Pastor Lenny Duncan's life and his experiences as a Black man in America are an incredible testimony to why Black History Month is so important and why we have so much work to do. Those of us who are white privilege, those of us who've been the benefactors of white supremacy, beneficiaries of white supremacy, those of us who've been in this place, we need to learn, we need to listen, and we need to speak up and do something. So this is an important time of year because it does give us the ability to highlight that. And we've been taking a turn each week, each of us highlighting somebody that we want to think about or we give thanks for. So sort of a hero to us in Black History Month. And it's Iain's turn this week. So Iain, what do you got for us?
well, this one's a very recent addition to Canadian money, I guess. So today we're going to be talking about Viola Desmond.
Okay.
The reason I bring up money is because she was the first Canadian woman to appear alone on a Canadian banknote, the $10 bill. You may or may not have heard back in 2018. She was a businesswoman and a beautician. She founded in Nova Scotia a beauty parlor that tailored toward the Black hairstyles. And she was arrested at the Roslyn Theater and started the Canadian version of the what is it called here? Modern civil rights movement in Canada. A very, very powerful woman. She's on the $10 bill. And also, there's something fun here to add about Toronto. There was hold on, let me just find it. I wrote it down. Here it is. In Scarborough, there was a park renamed for her, which is super, super cool, back in 2018 also.
Nice.
Right on.
And
Very good.
if I'm remembering these details right too, she made that stand about not refusing to go to the balcony or whatever it was. In
It was in a movie theater.
In a movie theater.
She was nearsighted, so she was like, "I'm gonna sit, at the front of the theater
in the lower level." Yeah.
Yeah, and then the police were like, "You can't do that because segregation," which is horrible. And then she was brought to jail, and wasn't given her rights, wasn't given a lawyer, anything like that.
Right. And if I remember right, this was before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. And she's an incredible, doesn't get talked about a lot, more so since, and I'm so thankful when I saw her put on a $10 bill and her profile raised. But this is a woman who fought for civil rights a long time ago.
Yep.
Amazing. Good one, Iain.
That's great. Good pick, Iain. Excellent pick. Excellent. That's great. Which reminds me, I think I owe you $10, but we'll work on that in a little bit. So that's great, guys. We'll do that again next episode. Okay.
All right.
So Pastor Lenny is here, I think. So we're going to
we should let
Zoom room. We're going to have a little chat.
Let the good pastor get in here.
And here he is, Pastor Lenny Duncan, joining us on the Vickers Crossing podcast. From our Canadian listeners will be really excited, and then I'm going to break your heart. But Lenny's in Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, we got you.
So that's the thing. It's not that Vancouver and it's not that Washington if you live in the States. Because if you tell people you live in Washington, they're like, oh, well, I live in Baltimore. I'll just drive down and see you. You're like, no, dude, there's a whole fucking state.
Continent.
That's right.
You have to drive across the continent, man. And it's like, we know your pain because we live in London, Ontario. And whenever we say London, people go, oh, London. No, the other London. Yeah.
Where's the Queen? Not that London, right? I don't want to say not the fun London.
Yeah, I know.
It's London, Ontario.
Believe me, it's not as much fun as the other London.
Okay.
Vancouver, Washington, near Portland, though, right? Like you're near.
I'm right across the river from Portland. We're a Portland suburb. It's kind of where people I guess, move up and move out a bit. They moved to Vancouver.
Who we have, guys? We had what? Stephen Patterson, the Forgotten Creed, the book, The Forgotten Creed.
Yeah.
Stephen Patterson.
Yeah.
He's in Portland, I believe.
He's in
Oh,
Portland,
there's so
yeah.
much good stuff happening in
Yeah.
Portland, man. I particularly this summer, I've never been prouder to join a new white city. To be honest with you, it's one of the whitest. It is the whitest city in America, actually.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
Good.
and
Good.
it's but they really stood up. So
Excellent.
I'm
Big
proud
time.
to be part of the area. I
Good
am
stuff.
gonna
Hey.
have to put on my hot water
Yeah.
on my tea in a second. So if you hear my kettle, I'm gonna run and
All right. Not to
be
worry.
in there.
Perfect.
Not to
Perfect.
worry.
I
We'll fix
basically
all
so
that.
glad-
live on Irish breakfast tea now.
All right,
I don't
boy.
know.
That's what I like.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is like I stopped pretending that the world isn't broken and that shit is not really strange.
Yeah.
I know everyone else is really into showing up for an hour to a Zoom meeting and pretending like everything's fine.
Right.
I personally have experienced the deep and profound spiritual, mental, and emotional, and I would even say physical shift that the whole world is going through since last March.
Amen.
And I've really leaned into it. I'm not
Yeah.
pretending it's not happening.
That's right.
And that means that I'm very vulnerable about some of my emotional health or some of my mental health, or sometimes I'll be very vulnerable about my spiritual state of being. And my political analysis all comes from that place, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm just not pretending that shit's not weird. So like if I do a podcast interview and you hear a kettle, that's because I've been at home for a year.
I like Lenny. I gotta say, Lenny, you're you're a kindred spirit, buddy.
Yeah, it's like everyone wants to act like it's not normal. As someone who's formerly incarcerated, I'm telling you, the psychological stuff you're experiencing is not normal. This is usually how we torture people usually.
That's right. That's true. It's true.
Right?
So it's not good stuff, right?
Right.
Well,
That's how we torture criminals. Now think about it. The two things that we can do are the worst to you, right? We can kill you. Let me get this kettle. Since we're not pretending nothing's
we're not going to
real.
pretend it's not real. You get yourself that Irish breakfast tea.
Yeah,
We're not editing this either. This is real.
No, this is real, folks.
Yeah. But the two things that we can do, right? Like that we do to punish people the worst. We always think of the death penalty because Christians, and they're so fascinated with death. It's a fucking death cult.
That's true.
But the other thing is that the other thing that we do to someone is we put them in isolation.
Yes.
And we cut them off from all community.
Torture.
And that's usually next to death. That's the worst thing we can do to someone.
Yeah.
And we've all, as someone who's formerly incarcerated, I'm very aware of the fact that that's what we're all experiencing.
Yeah.
What we're all experiencing is a much lighter, softer, and certainly more privileged version than what I experienced in county prisons throughout the country.
Yeah.
But it's the same deleterious psychological and spiritual effects on the community. And we're watching it play out in our churches.
Yeah.
And around us, people are fucking losing it.
Right.
Yes.
Has a devastating effect. Listen, folks, let me tell you about this man who's just actually started the podcast with an incredible rant, which we love. But this is what you've got is Pastor Lenny Duncan here, is a follower of Jesus Christ and a passionate love affair with grace. Lenny spent most of his teens homeless. After leaving home at 13, he spent time in all 48. How do you say that? Contiguous states. Contiguous. We don't have these. Like, I don't know. Can you catch that? Is that contagious?
It is. You can catch it.
Okay.
And honestly, what we do to the English language down here.
So what we're talking about is all the states that are not like, Yukon or Alaska and Hawaii.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
wow.
okay.
A little bitter about that, huh?
Well, oh, well, it's okay.
That.
You guys will get over that little White House episode too.
So, we're doing great. We're doing great down here.
Yeah. But anyway, this guy has spent time sleeping by the side of the highway or in penthouses along the way. He's been a prisoner of war in the so-called war on drugs. After systemic oppression on drugs didn't kill him, Lenny found himself in a strange and odd place, the church. Lenny has been everything from a high school dropout, drug dealer, sex worker, street corner poet, hitchhiker, dharma bum, small town drifter, seminarian, political activist, father, pastor, lover, public theologian, writer, and now guest on the Vicar's Crossing, which is going to have to alter his podcast. He now thrives in in the Pacific Northwest. He's currently the pastor of the Jubilee Collective, community organized around the idea that maybe Jesus is an anti-racist and loves queer, trans, and two-spirited people too. You can find out more about this man online. Go look him up. He's amazing.
Yeah, UnitedStatesOfGrace.com if you want to check me out. That's
United
all my
States
stuff.
of Grace. Listen, let's start with this collective. A year ago, you packed up and you moved from Brooklyn to Vancouver, Washington. We'll hear more later that you're no stranger to crisscrossing the United States. You pastored a Jubilee Collective, and your webpage says that Jubilee is a community organized around that idea that maybe Jesus is an anti-racist, loves queer, trans, and two-spirited people as well. Tell us about the Jubilee Collective and how it came about.
Oh man, anarchy. The only thing Lutherans are good for, starting shit for no reason. I mean, honestly, the deleterious effects of a entire denomination that founded all Protestantism, and it's just basically we're just like it's just organized anarchy. So the same kind of principles. There's a great church here called Messiah Lutheran Church, and pastors Kathy and Peter Broflot about 2 years ago did one of these kind of corporate-y like discernment periods, but they invited like the right guy in who just wasn't corporate-y. He was just a Jesus guy, and he came in and he was just like, like he basically got the entire leadership team to agree that even though they have like 500 families connected to the church and a couple campuses, and their budget looks a certain way, that really they had plateaued, right? And that they had no idea what the church would look like in 5 years. And I don't know how this guy got an entire church leadership team and a staff of 25 to that place, but he did, which led them to like putting out a request for proposal. So they did not look for a pastor through the usual methods. They did not go to the bishop. They did not do the things that we typically do in our system. They put out a request for proposal like they were a damn corporation or they were a brand. Yeah, because it was an endowed position for 2 years.
Okay.
And I put in my request for proposal, and I came to visit just to kind of interview at a big church, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just to get that under my belt. Yeah. And at the time, it wasn't called Jubilee Collective. We were calling it the Church with No Names because that was just easier for me. And, I really just wanted to take the principles that I talked about in my book, Dear Church.
Yeah.
And just try them at a church and see if I had the financial freedom to do that, meaning if my salary was covered and I knew the people around it were supportive, then what if I just gathered around these ideas, right? So I'm tired of the so-called conservatives, and I hate that they call themselves conservatives.
Yeah.
How could they be conservative scriptural theologians when they don't even read scripture closely? It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane to me. Yeah. So I hate that they even took that word from us, right? Yeah. But my thing is that we let them set the table.
Yes.
I'm tired of showing up and saying, oh, well, we should be doing this, or have you thought about adding this? Right. And I said, well, what if I could start over and just set the table the way I think it should be set? So instead of I think our queer siblings and our trans siblings and our two-spirited siblings are way over radical welcome. Radical welcome just means that I get to join your church and have the same microaggressions. That's fucking awesome.
Thank you for your microaggression.
Right. Thank you for teaching me how to be heteronormative. Yay. Now I go adopt a little kid. So that makes sense to you, right?
Yeah.
And they only even allow that for gay cis white men.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so it's very difficult to find space. So I said, I'm just going to set the table. We're going to get in a radical affirmation. If you're LGBTQIA and you even have the slightest interest in the divine, we're going to make sure you get a scholarship and that you go to seminary. We've already done that for 2 people.
Wow. Good for you.
Wow.
Right? If you just have the slightest interest, you've shown just the minimal effort that these straight kids show. Because what do? They go to a Luther camp fucking 4 times in their life, and then we hand them $100,000 as if that is formation.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So what it really is, it's all about access and systems and being, normalized and familiarized within church systems, because that's how. And then I'm sure the Episcopalian Church does the same thing,
Same
right?
shit.
That's
Same
our
shit.
system, right? It's the same stuff. So I just, what if the system didn't matter?
Right.
What if I found you and like I'm willing to put my word and my reputation down?
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
That's
okay.
the idea.
Right. And then the second thing is like, what if Jesus is just as anti-racist as us? What if Jesus is just as concerned with the white supremacy that's burning down the new Babylon or the new Rome and might have deleterious effects? I love that word. I'm just sticking with it the whole podcast. Let's see if we can get it.
The word of the day, folks, is deleterious. Okay.
Well, because like, meow. It's just because meow. Like, from Super
I'm not
Troopers.
a cat. I'm not a cat.
Yeah,
I'm here. I'm live. I'm not a cat.
Super Troopers, when they pull them over.
Oh yes,
they fit. So I'm gonna try and fit as many deleteriouses as I can.
Okay, you go.
But my point is that this affects the entire world. You think Jesus is not concerned about white supremacy? Like, are you? I mean, the polite thing to say is, well, perhaps you should examine the gospel narrative and the fact that we worship a God who steps into human history for the express purpose of salvation. That's called collective liberation by people the world's over. Or you could say, are you just fucking stupid?
Yeah.
Right? Because are you not reading the same stories I'm reading?
Yeah.
Right. And so we gather under those ethics. And the third ethic that we don't talk about that always makes people uncomfortable, the third thing for Jubilee Collective is the idea is to work me out of a job.
Right.
I'm a writer. I'm a hustler. I don't need the church to survive. I'm a tent maker. I know that makes people uncomfortable to hear that, but it's going to be your reality in 10 years anyway. I'm just trying to model it. Yeah. I'm just trying to model it for you.
Yeah.
So what's that going to look like to lift up lay people, to empower lay people? We do this thing called Revolutionary Seminary. We just finished our first semester. We're going to do our own not so academic conference. And the ideas coming from some of these so-called lay folks who are not clerics are incredibly stunning and powerful. So that's the other thing we do is the third principle for Jubilee Collective is how do we work Pastor Lenny out of a job?
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's
I long for the day of going into a meeting or dinner or whatever it is, and someone says, well, we should say grace, and the whole bloody room stares at me. Right. It's like I long for that day when that ends.
Right.
Like I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, or like, I long for the day when someone's like, hey, it's been a year of COVID. And like, according to like any theological document, I can baptize my grandchild.
Yeah.
Pastor, will you write a liturgy for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can baptize my grandchild.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But we're so afraid of these little pockets of power.
Yeah.
We won't let them go.
That's right. It's very institutional, isn't it? Like, I mean, it's, and we see this. I mean, Rob and I see this in our meetings with our colleagues, and, there's a lot of anxiety about the future and what about my job and, all of that stuff. But
it's
I mean,
over.
Man, look, it's over,
it's
man.
Fucking over.
Cash it in now.
Man. I mean, like institutional church is over in a very real way. And what we're really seeing is the existential crisis of people who are much more invested in the institution than the people who've come to serve it. No one who's come to serve the church in the last 15 years expected to retire.
No. Well, if they did, they're nuts. And
none of us expected this. We're we're now 2 generations of people who are like, wow, this thing isn't going to end well, but I'm going to do it anyway for Christ.
Right.
But they're still talking to us about saving the institution, and they don't see the the distance in that conversation.
Yeah, that's true. Now, listen, this is Ash Wednesday in Dear Church, which is a great book too, by the way, a love letter from a black preacher to the whitest church in America. I mean, maybe you need to come to Canada and check out the Anglican Church of Canada, because it's pretty damn white. As
you can see
from the very diverse screen you're looking at.
But I don't talk shit about my Canadian cousins in case I have to become an
refugee status.
Right. Like, and I have to transfer my credentials.
Yeah, I got you. We got you,
Lenny. Bishop that's listening up there.
We got you. Okay, we got you covered. Okay, so but you're calling in that book for the dismantling of white supremacy, which is so absolutely what needs to happen in the church, in our institutions, everywhere in this 21st century, describing it as the way of the cross. And that decidedly is Lenten language. And so as we enter into our Lenten journey, folks are talking today about, giving up chocolate and beer and all kinds of privileged shit that doesn't matter. But it's generally all of us who've benefited from white supremacy. As someone who's benefited from that myself and my own white privilege, I'm finding it difficult, particularly given I feel like I've been in Lent for a year. Since last March here. Okay. I'm finding it difficult having to read your 2 books this week and engage in this annual rite of pretense and privilege, enough to sacrifice just the next little thing. My soul is vexed within me, if you will. Like I want to enter into the way to cross the way that you describe it, Lenny. I think at some point you say that white folk need to start doing white folk work and dismantle white supremacy. And I pray for the courage to consider that something I should be doing in Lent and beyond. You've named white supremacy for what it is, a theological problem. And for someone like myself, I worry because I don't want it to be virtue signaling, right? I don't want it just to be words.
Right.
I don't want us to be woke. I want us to be active. I want to be an ally in a way that actually matters. And so part of my discipline this Lent, I think, is really trying to mine down, and we've been talking about Black History Month here on the podcast, but really about trying to identify the ways in which I can do something real, which is be converted.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder your reflection on all that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the first thing is that, like, you have to realize that well, I think the first thing you have to realize is that I'm a heretic. And what I mean by that is that I don't believe that you are, I don't believe in total depravity. I don't believe that you are the broken thing in this world. I believe that you are the imago Dei. You may not know it, but you are. And that you are the gift in this world. And that the world itself is broken. So I'm coming from a really different place than other theologians when we enter this conversation. I truly believe, Kevin, that you're the gift. Rob, you're the gift, right? Iain, you're the gift, right? Iain, how do you say Iain? How am I saying your name wrong?
Yeah, Iain is 100% correct.
All right, cool. Because I saw an extra IN and I was like, that's some Canadian shit.
Well, it's Welsh, actually.
Well, some Welsh shit.
Sorry.
Don't know it. No, it's fine.
I didn't name myself.
No, I know you. I know you can't defend it. My name is Lenny. I mean, I sound like I'm trying to sell you something out of the back of the truck. It's fine. But my point is that I'm coming from a really different place. And so what I want to say is that we need to remember that Jesus died for his friends. Like at that Last Supper was not about some stupid shit we do in front of people every Sunday. And it really has become some stupid shit. We have rendered the sacraments well below their value in an attempt to democratize them. And that's the Protestant church's thing to wrestle with.
That's right.
But anti-racism or dismantling white supremacy is a lifestyle, just like Christ knew, facing the systemic oppressions, the religious oppressions, the spiritual oppressions, which we never talk about. We never talk about how radical evil is moving about the world and up to an agenda, because we have intellectualized ourselves away from the supernatural so fucking readily.
Yeah.
And now we're faced with a world of the supernatural in the last year, because it's the only thing that can explain what's been happening.
Yeah. Well,
I say all that to say that you have to be willing to die unto yourself. And that sounds like such a trope. But what I mean by that is you have to be willing to lose everything.
Yeah.
Job, career, reputation. And that's probably how it's going to end up. White supremacy, when it punches back hard. And it's going to show up in members. It'll show up as family members. It'll show up as those incredibly awkward Christmas meals you've had about all the shit that's been going on. It'll show up as broken friendships. It'll show up has rended relationships, right? And it punches back really, really hard, and it's going to take a toll on you. And I think part of it is that when we enter this Lenten practice, my whole sermon tonight is like, you nailed it. For once, you nailed the text. You've been in your prayer closet for a year.
Mm.
No one has seen your alms for a year.
Mm.
No one has seen your terror, your fear, your angst, or your anguish with God. You have rended your clothes since you've been in your home. Don't lie to me. You have thrown ashes on your head. You have been covered in tears. You have felt like you have lost everything and gained everything back 4 or 5 times since this thing has happened.
Amen.
This is the year you actually nailed the text from the gospel we read every year. This is the one year you did it perfectly. And that's the hope. The hope is you're going to be able to walk out of your prayer closet empowered by what you've been forced to witness as a world for once, right? Which is the existential crisis of white supremacy and colonialism as expressed through the new Rome or the new empire, the United States of America. And will Rome destroy itself in the world like it's done before? Will empire do what it's always done before? Or will something new and amazing be played out in the spiritual drama or the cosmic drama that we call fucking life here on earth? And we don't know the answer to that question yet, but I can tell you where the fight is and what we have to push back against. And it's certainly white supremacy. And theologically, we carry a bigger weight. Our bishops won't do it. Listen, I don't know what it's like in your church. I was going to talk about the American bishops. They failed the world at a critical juncture in salvation history. The world. Elizabeth Eaton, my presiding bishop, is certainly guilty of that. And most of the local bishops are. And that does not, Michael Curry from the Episcopal Church, they're all guilty. Because for 5 years, they played both sides to the best of their ability to protect the institution.
Right.
While people suffered.
Died.
While women had hysterectomies forced on them, Manglaga style, right? And no one batted an eye. Children were being kept in camps, not just at the border, at every major airport in America. Any pastor who actually gave a shit could just go to their local airport and say, are you guys keeping some of the kids here? And you had a pretty high percentage chance of yes. Within 250 miles, you could have drove and saw for yourself what was happening to those children and demanded your way in. But you didn't. Right? And so this happened across the entire political, theological, and ideological spectrum in a country that exports its bullshit to everyone.
We had a truck. We had a truckload come into Canada.
Right. And so that's why it's a theological problem. After 2016, if you don't believe that particularly, and we don't want to just beat up on the evangelicals. Evangelical theology was the platform that dude was able to stand on and appear to be some sort of new David or whatever. And mainline theological limpness, weakness, and total lack of character from all of our leaders is just as guilty for what happened. And I am just as guilty under that pronouncement. I did what I could when I could, but there were certainly times I could have done more.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. And like, I really appreciate the way you began that, which is reminding us of our belovedness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the deal. The deal is you're the gift and Jesus died for his friends. And like, listen, Jesus didn't have to die in the way that Emmett Till didn't have to die here.
Yes.
The gospel stories are a reflection of our character, not God's
not the
character.
other. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. God doesn't desire us to lynch our leaders.
No, that's right.
What kind of God are you worshiping?
Yeah, no.
That's the white people God.
Yeah, I agree.
The white people God wants you to do that. Lynch your leader.
That's right.
I'm sure God would be happy with, you know what? We've decided we're just going to listen and be a kingdom of God.
Yes. Yes.
God would be like, holy shit.
This is nice.
You mean you don't have to murder me again?
You don't have to murder me again? Yeah, beautiful.
to figure it out. Wow, you guys
Yeah.
have really, that's not bad. 2,000 years in spiritual kindergarten.
Yeah.
You're fucking savages. Like, what?
It's true. Now, listen, you've had an interesting journey towards faith. Ian's got a question here that sort of brings out some of the reading in this incredible book you've got coming out in May, United States of Grace. Ian, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, and it touches upon something that sort of relates to me personally. Like I'm a singer-songwriter, and you say that your music has played a large role in your journey within your upcoming book. You write, and I'll just quickly quote you right here. Quote, music has been my only consistent companion since I was 12. It was the only thing I would allow to whisper into the secret places of my heart, to soothe years of trauma and pain. I love music deeply, and I would go to incredible lengths to experience it live. You recount in the book that you met Jesus at a Grateful Dead concert.
Incredible place to meet Jesus.
Yeah,
That's
which is
fantastic. Yeah. He would love
It's
to.
definitely a place he's hanging out.
Oh, I got
totally.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, he'd
Homeless
love to
guy,
Yeah.
likes to drink a lot,
Oh,
loves
yeah.
a good party.
Jerry
Definitely
Garcia.
was
I mean,
getting
come on.
laid.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, come on. Would
Yeah.
would you read some of that section for us, and then at the
Absolutely.
other end of it, I'll ask you more questions.
Sure. So this is from I think from the first chapter. So the band started to sing a song called "We Bid You Good Night," a soulful a cappella arrangements based on an existing folk song, and the lyrics open with, "Lay down, my dear brothers, lay down and take your rest. Won't you lay your head upon your Savior's breast? Oh, I love you. Oh, but Jesus loves you the best. And I bid you good night, good night, and good night." I stood rocking back and forth to this tune, and I knew it was over. The battle that had been raging inside me for over 20 years was coming to an end. I knew that either I was going to be dead in the morning or something was going to happen. In response to the lyrics, the crowd clapped in unison to keep time with the band. It's about as intimate as 10,000 people can get, and that's when I heard it, a voice from deep down inside. This voice was so quiet, I could hear it over a crowd. A voice so quiet, it could level mountains. A voice so quiet, it could stop a riot. A voice so quiet, it makes a world stand still. A voice of the voice of the divine doesn't scream truth. It is truth. And when it enters your life, all other things stop. You listen, and you are changed. This message was simple and clear. You're getting sober today. I felt the weight of decades suddenly slide into place with a satisfying click, like a key that's been stuck in the lock, but finally turns and opens the door. I felt myself inwardly rearranged almost instantly. The most amazing thing about this voice is that I believed it. Hearing a divine voice may strike you as strange or outside your experience of this world. Let me be clear. It was completely outside mine too. But think of the chorus of voices you hear every day. I mean, the constant narrative we call our minds. I was hearing a lot of voices leading up to this, and their messages were kill yourself. You're worthless, and who could ever love you? But this voice outside the usual stream of consciousness that spoke with a quiet, assured authority unlike anything I had ever heard before and ever since. It was like a voice over a raging sea that called my name.
Wow. That's I really like that, by the way. That's awesome. Can you talk more about how music has influenced the way that you live your life and your journey?
Well, music's really like what I'm talking about in a lot of ways. If you ever read my stuff, I'm really talking about, or rather, music has really influenced the way that I write. I'm definitely a product of hip hop culture. I'm definitely a product of beatnik culture and my influences with Ginsberg and stuff really early on. And I was 13, 14 years old, homeless in the country and wandering around, and I was on Grateful Dead tour. And so that whole sort of esoteric way of approaching music, right? That music, knowing, I think in the same way that a good musician knows that they are just the instrument and that really their muse is singing through them, and that the best you can do is be more ragged to the point that you're just used by that energy, that stream of consciousness in the universe, and then that's all you are. You're just useful in the way that James Baldwin said. You're useful in the way that sand is useful, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You serve purpose, right? And I know that I'm not a writer. I know that I'm just a antenna, right? And that I'm just tuning into something. And I know a lot of that comes from music. And I know the voice of the divine comes from music. And really, music's the clearest way we hear not only the collective consciousness of our particular cultures and countries, but we also hear from the divine in ways that are really, really able to pull us into the supernatural and elevate our consciousness and pull us into realms that we barely touch, right? That's when the veil gets thin.
That's right.
When's the veil thinnest for you? When you're dancing at a show, when you're at a, you know what I mean? The veil is thin. And some people don't respond to that. And I understand that. I'm going to lose a lot of fans in this moment. But I just want to say, if you're one of those people who tells me I don't listen to music, I just want to know, are the people in your basement fucking alive?
Have you cooked any
And
of
if
them?
they're not, right, like if they're not, right, like I just don't get it, because as someone who has all the words but never feels heard, music's the only way sometimes with people I love. They're like, what's going on with you? I'll send them a song.
Right.
Yeah.
This is what's going on with me.
Yeah.
This is it. I couldn't say it better myself.
It's fantastic.
Right. And I truly believe that that's God using us as an artist. I believe that,
Yeah, big time.
So
big
that's how the divine expresses itself.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you made that connection, Iain. That's awesome. Good
Iain, my suggestion is make sure you send a link to Lenny of your you just released an EP, and Lenny, send it to Lenny.
Yeah.
Sure.
If you got a video
awesome.
too, we'll do it at our church, man.
Yeah.
Hook it up.
Cool.
Hook it up.
I'll tell you what, guys. If we've learned nothing else about Lenny the last half hour, it's that he's honest, and
that's right.
That's huge, and honest testimony. I want to talk to you a little bit about growing up with a white mom and a black father. You share in the book that your folks had started to kind of drink the Kool-Aid about a post-racial America, but in Philly, that's not what you were experiencing at all. And I just want to read a little quote from the book where you write, "It is a strange day when whiteness makes its pronouncement on you. But when that day comes, when you realize as a small black child that you are truly black, well, all of us remember it. That's why so many writers talk about this day in their own lives, when blackness is a revelation and a pale white horse streaks through your tender developing world. I was aware I was black in the way most adolescents are aware of their gender identity. But what was knocking on the door was the knowledge of what it means to be black in America." Can you recount that story a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, I talk a little bit about it. It's the first time, I was heightenedly aware of race in a weird way. So I grew up on Race Street, which I think is fucking hilarious. And so I grew up on Race Street in Philadelphia, right? Who would have guessed?
Well.
But when I was a kid, I always looked at it as, you're going to win the race someday. Anyway.
Yeah.
And my mom was the only white person in this black neighborhood that I knew in my world, except for police and teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes like city officials who would end up on TV and shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't experienced whiteness. And so we moved. I had only experienced whiteness in the way of like black women being really upset that my father married my mother, or my dad being called a nigger by a cop because he was with a white woman, and her being called a nigger lover.
Wow.
Right. So so for one thing, my dynamic was different. West Philadelphia is beautifully and wonderfully shea butter and ebony fucking black, and still remains that way to this day.
Yeah.
And even though it's being gentrified, right, like all the rest of the neighborhoods, but still what I would say about West Philadelphia is that being a West Philadelphia means that you are irrepressibly black.
Mm.
We cannot, our blackness cannot be repressed.
Right.
I just don't know how to explain it, right?
Yeah.
And so we moved to Maryland, and some kids are picking on us. I don't want to give away the whole chapter, but this guy shows up at the front door, because we defended ourselves in the fight with a shotgun, and it's in those moments that you realize, when you see the terror, right? When you see the terror of the American nightmare fall on your parents' face,
Mm.
and you watch their little beliefs melt, right? I mean, interracial marriage had been legal since the 1800s, in Pennsylvania, because Quakers, right?
Right.
But no one really fucking did it,
Right.
right? No one did it. Loving versus Bunting was only 6 years before my parents got married,
Wow.
maybe 8. I don't know. They got married in 76. I think Loving Bunting was what? 70, 69,
69, 70,
right?
Yeah.
Right. So, they got married 76. So this is a new thing, and they really believed that the world was changing. And in that moment, as a child, every black child knows the moment they realize they're black, and what that means in America. And that's why I compare it to folks like gender identity, because trans folks know they're trans from the day they're fucking born. They may not have language for it. They may not be able to express it to you right away, but as soon as they get language, they're going to be like, dude, this is who I am, right? And blackness is the same way, but there's a difference when you realize what that means in America.
Right. Mm-hmm. And for you personally.
And for you personally, it changes the whole thing. It changes the whole perspective, and you realize that literally who I am is dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that is something as a child that you walk with, in a way that is strange, and having a white mother, having light skin, I'm not going to pretend that I don't I have a proximity to whiteness that makes me more palatable,
right?
Compared to dark skin, say black women who've been saying shit I've been saying for 20 years, but because people assume I have a penis in my pants and I'm light skinned, they want to listen to me, right?
That's true,
right?
Whoa.
Right. So
that's absolutely
so
right.
I have a proximity to whiteness, right? That I'm constantly undressing.
Yeah.
But that's all in response to how America has positioned me in blackness.
Yeah. It was,
and it's very different than how it's positioned up there. I mean, they still won't admit that their entire republic's built on slavery.
Right.
We still do not have a politician who's ever admitted that in a way that would lead to reparations, even though we were promised reparations by Abraham Lincoln, and it was one of the founding blocks of the new republic going forward after Civil War.
Right.
And to expect after 140 years of an unfulfilled promise for this, this tense we're not going to do it situation, the republic can't stand even under the Republican principles created by Lincoln.
Right.
They were built on, we're going to pay these people back what we owe them.
Right. Even a conversation about it frightens people to the point you get what you had on January 6th.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, if anybody that can't connect January 6th to white supremacy is not paying attention.
Well,
right.
And part of it is, dude, I really believe if you're a revolutionary and you're listening to the sound of my voice and you hear me and you think I have anything of value to add to the conversation, it's really time to stop wasting. I'm trying to wake up people who don't get it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And it's time to organize and gather and build the society we want to see, build the republics we want to see, build the communities we want to see. It's no longer about, can we have your permission? And are you guys doing it right? No, clearly you guys are all doing it wrong.
That's right.
And we're just going to try something else.
That's not working.
It's not working.
It ain't working. Yeah. We've been using the term circling the drain for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we, but I, and this is a funny thing to say to a Canadian crowd. I mean, the part of the book that I think that people are going to find hard to understand, and it's actually a defense of the principles of the Republic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually really into the founding documents.
Right.
That I actually believe there is something of value and worth in the American Republic that's worth holding on to. And it's a defense of the Republic from the position of someone who's never had the rights or privileges of it, but yet still feels compelled, despite the history of systemic oppression and all those things. I don't try and hide those in the book. I put them on center stage.
Yeah.
Right. But yet I still believe in this idea that people of disparate cultures, races, backgrounds, creeds can gather in one place and decide as a people how that republic will go.
Yeah.
Right.
That's something worth holding on to.
Amen.
Yeah, big time. Yep. Kevin alluded to it in the introduction that, you hit the road early. You're 13 or so. You experienced a lot of pain at home. And you're right with really incredible forgiveness and love for your family in the book. Those years were also made no easier by the police. And we've been watching and hearing about this. Certainly it's been on our minds for a while. And you're right about what would happen if the police were called to the house. And I just want to read a little bit here. You wrote that, as much as I hated my world, it was all I had. And I had seen what happens when the authorities show up. I have never seen the police show up in Black America and make a situation better. Ever. Never seen that. And so obviously we've been talking on this podcast and in other corners too about, since the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matters demonstrations, many have been calling for this idea of defunding the police. We couldn't help but think of this when reading, some of your book that's coming out. Can you speak about your thoughts on this growing call to reorganize funds that are directed to policing in our cities, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, as a member of the BIPOC Faith Leader Council for Black Lives here in the Pacific Northwest, I talked about this idea, this principle around around this for a long time. My position is simple: policing in America is dangerous for Black and Brown communities, and it is dangerous for police. And that the idea that you can buy a Kmart or a Walmart Blue Lives Matter flag and go wave it and terrorize Black and Brown people as somehow supporting officers is insane. If you really cared about police, see, this is the whole thing. Because here's what police are. Police are a result of the fact that we are Christian, so-called Christian nations who are founded on the principles of Christianity, but don't want to love our neighbor. So I don't want to know why you're beating your wife, Rob.
Yeah.
I'm just going to listen to it every Saturday night, and I'm never going to knock on your door and invite you to breakfast and ask you if I can pray for you. No, what I'm going to do, Rob, is I'm just going to listen to it until my consciousness gets too much, and then I'm going to call my armed concierge service. And they're going to show up at your fucking door after 5 other calls, after possibly, most likely, most of these folks are vets. Most of them have been in this endless war on terror.
Right.
Then they have 6 weeks training, and then I'm going to arm them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to send them to your front door to untangle the incredibly complex emotional and spiritual situation you've been wrestling with for 20 years.
That's right.
And I got 5 minutes to do it.
That's going to work.
And assess
That's going to work.
On. And so what's happening is we put the so-called like right, or those who are supporting the police, use the police as a pawn in their endless game and battle against Black and Brown communities for their own fiscal and political and I would even argue spiritual gain, right? And the reason they do this is because we're talking about other poor people who had to sign up for an army that was going to some land that we knew the war was on some bogus shit, but we're there 20 years later still massacring people. Right. So we know these are poor people.
Yeah.
Right? They're poor people who aren't getting the best education system. I mean, if anything, America is an experiment in like why you should teach people the scientific fucking method. I mean, right? Like if they just understood the scientific method, we might not be killing hundreds of thousands of people. But my point is, this is all a product of the fact that Americans have lost the ability to reason. Yes. And it's all the deleterious effects.
Yes. Hey, he's got another one in there. Take a drink.
of our political system, right?
Yeah.
Of our political system. And so when we say defund the police, what we're saying is invest in the community that has constant drug dealers on the corner, because that's the only way them kids know how to hustle and make a living. I was one of those people, and I just got handed a full ride for a PhD. If you invest in these people, they might become something, right?
Right.
Yes.
And it might not be something that like academia or what's acceptable in white society. They get to make those decisions on their own. The second thing is, we don't even give these guys PTSD training.
No.
How can you kill another human being and not be in 6 months of therapy afterwards?
Yes.
Right.
And we should pay them to do nothing but therapy for that 6
Amen.
months.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a problem on both sides of the scale. They refuse to invest in anything but in weapons to basically militarize our neighborhoods and treat our neighborhoods like they're correctional facilities, open air correctional facilities, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it's because we don't want to know who our neighbor is. We don't want to know who God is. We don't want to knock on the door and find out why you don't have enough to eat. I'd rather call, and why you're looking in my car.
It's expedient.
I'd rather call, right? It's expedient, it's easy. And that is really, when we talk about defunding the police, we're talking about investing in the kingdom of God.
Right.
Exactly.
And if you looked at all the principles of what the defund movement is talking about, you would be like, holy shit, this looks like the kingdom of God. So they want to invest in the poor. They want to stand in solidarity with the prisoner. They want to make sure that the hungry and the naked are fed and clothed. And they want to make sure that people have an experience, like have enough going on in their community that can actually move up Maslow's hierarchy and think about something else than the fucking rent.
Yeah.
For
That's
one.
right. Who does
right?
that sound?
Yeah.
That sounds familiar to me from somewhere.
Right. But when we frame the argument, right, when we frame the argument, they're trying to attack police. No, we're trying to fucking save them, because you've put them in an impossible situation. You will never stop crime this way. You will never improve communities this way. And these officers are going to get run through the grinder. And what do? You put them in an impossible situation when they murder someone and their career's over, right?
Yeah.
Right? We blame the officers, and then they scapegoat the officers.
That's right.
So it's like, even as a black revolutionary, I feel bad for the officers on the other side, because I'm like, they're pawns in the same system. Look at these Capitol Police.
That's right.
Dude hung them out to dry.
Yeah. Well, and the guy, this officer, God bless him, this guy, Officer Cynic, was a Trump supporter. He was a Trump supporter. He was into all that, and this guy stood as a hero that day. And
as a hero. And I don't believe in a hero because he was a cop or because he was defending the goddamn Senate building. He was a hero because whatever his principles were, he died for them.
Right.
That's what makes him a hero.
And here's a guy who's getting beaten by people with flags that say Blue Lives Matter. Beaten with an American flag. Kaepernick is bad for taking a knee, but you can use the same flag to beat the shit out of somebody. Like, what is this?
Right. Right. And that's what I mean by that's what the defund movement wants to take away, because it's an endless cycle, right? And we've experienced it particularly on far left circles since the WTO riots.
Right.
I mean, we've been seeing this in America, and this uptick in the militarization of the police for a very long time. This has been a concerning trend since 9/11.
That's right.
The Patriot Act changed the world, and Patriot Act 2 made the world a prison.
Right.
America can come get you anywhere they want now. Yeah. Not only can they drone you in your house and get away with it, probably in Canada if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But they can lock your ass up, steal all your rights, and hold you as some sort of non-citizen with no rights anywhere, not even in a Geneva Convention.
Right.
And we did that shit without even thinking twice down here.
That's right. It's pretty quick. Fear does an amazing thing. I want to pivot to grace if we can, because as you said earlier
absolutely.
About your your belief in America and in the principles, the founding principles of the nation and so on. Your book is an incredible celebration of grace. The book that's coming out May the 18th. Despite all the shit you've experienced, despite all of what you've suffered and the challenges you've faced and the people who've abused you and as you've suffered at the hands of white supremacy, you're not bitter to the point of not wanting to rescue this thing. Of being present to this incredible idea of America. And you write about the great adventures. It's a chapter in the book, The American Adventure, And you write, have you ever been so lost that you abandon your your Rand McNally and your phone, which doesn't have service, and just followed a setting sun to some small town you'll never see again? If you haven't, then I contend that you may not know America at all. It isn't a critique. Most of us don't. Most of us haven't relied on the kindness of strangers for a meal and to let our peace fall on them when they let our peace fall on them when we entered their home or shook the dust off our shoes of a town that has rejected us. What would it take to wake up our primal need for something unexpected, different, and hopefully a little bit dangerous? That chapter is amazing. And I wonder if you'd read for us a small section and we can pick it up on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. On this day, it was all freedom. On this day, it was the lure of the only green highway sign that only green highway signs can invoke in me. On this day, it was the last great American adventure. It was kind people who picked me up and told me their stories. They would drive me 100 miles out of their way so I would have a better chance of getting a ride. They would stuff a $100 bill in my hand and politely ask me if I wanted to pray. They would invite me into their homes and offer shelter from the storm. You see, it's on this day, America, when I see what you were made of, and it was complex, messy, diverse, and so incredibly fucking hopeful. You who had penned me in poverty, who had passively participated in my destruction, who had turned a blind eye to my community, you met me with hope in my eye and inspiration wrapped around my head like a halo, and you stared right back at me with the same look in your own eyes. You saw me on a highway exit and stopped. You found me with broken wings and taught me to fly. You told me about your lives, lovers, family, and friends. You shared your gifts and your dreams and your God. You too were bewildered by the brokenness of the world and were trying to avoid the jagged edges of life. You too had scars and wounds that were still healing. America, I had seen you, I mean, really seen you, from the endless cornfields to the Rockies to your Black communities nestled in cities with so much fucking raw divine energy that makes Blackness so glorious. I have jumped in the Atlantic right before beginning of a ride and got out of that same ride in the same week and jumped in the Pacific. I have chased the horizon with you and crossed time zones off like a checklist at a local grocery store. I have seen you worship in the middle of a field and in cathedrals. I have watched you wake up and give it another go. I have seen you rise to the occasion and hide from the times. America, I've touched you. I've run my hands along your sides and felt the curves of your struggles and the dip in your joy. I have held you so close that our heartbeats have become one. I have been pressed so close to you, I can't tell where you begin or I end anymore. I've been punched in the gut by you and felt butterflies in my stomach after looking you in the eyes. I have felt your soft lips slowly make their way down my chest with a devilish grin on your face. I have sat in tattoo parlors as you have embedded your scenery up and down my arms, leaving me a work of rather strange art. I have had you choke the life out of me and woke up 3 days later to give it another chance. I have washed your worn feet from a walk that never seems to end, and you have washed mine. I have played with your hair and been delighted in the colors and textures of it. America, laying aside our leaders and our institutions, our squabbles, and our real systems of oppression just for a second, you amaze me, and I'm in awe of you. And that is because sometime in the 90s, you pulled over your Ford truck, creaked to a halting stop, and picked me up, and the adventure began. And for that reason, I will always love you.
Isn't that beautiful, boys?
Man, that's fantastic, man.
It's I mean, I thank you for the advance to be able to read the book, and I can't impress upon people enough to pre-order. You can pre-order the book on Amazon from May 18th. But I just I picked it up on Sunday to read it, and I didn't put it down until I fell asleep, and then I woke up and I read it till I was done. It's incredible. Now, since you finished writing the book, and you allude to this in the epilogue, and you speak about a friend of ours from Minneapolis who we know, but anyway, not to give too much away, you write about how a lot happened while you were, or since you wrote the book. You still have hope. I can tell that looking at you and listening to you. Grace is still going to prevail, right? Like grace is going to win, yeah?
I have to believe that the nature of the divine, what we know about God, right? So what do we know about God if we would just take the Christian perspective and, all the shit that we stole from Jewish people, right?
Yeah.
And right, and then we use poorly, by the way. Most of my rabbis say, not only did you steal it, but you used it
You
really
fucked it up.
poorly. Like,
What are you guys
Yeah.
doing over there?
yeah, like, wow. Like, not only do we let you kind of have it because you tried to kill us, but
Yeah.
you're really fucking it up.
Yeah.
So, but I gotta say, what I know of the nature of this God is the thing I hinted to at the beginning, that we really worship a God that steps into human history for one express purpose, and that's human salvation for some reason, which is so particular and so strange.
Mm-hmm.
And when that God steps into human history, it usually looks like collective liberation, right? We have the story of Moses, we have the story of Joseph, we have the story of Habakkuk, we have the story of the first exile, we have the story of the second exile, we have the poetry of Isaiah, both Isaiahs, maybe three Isaiahs.
Yeah.
I mean, we have all of that. And then we have the story of Jesus, and what does it mean when he faces the state? And really the first proto-European version of the empire and state. I mean, I know you have a lot of white listeners. I don't know if they know where they show up in the Bible, but at least in the Gospels, but it's not to the fucking end, and it's not a great part.
It's not a good part,
right?
Yeah.
White people don't show up to the end, and they're the police.
Yeah.
They're the fucking centurions.
Yeah.
That's when you first see proto-Europeans. Right? And we know the only one who was probably European and or proto-Italian, what we call Italian now, was Pilate.
Yeah.
So we know at least there's one European character in the story, and he's the fucking guy who murders God. Right? On behalf of religious leaders.
Right.
In a community that really didn't know what to do with this guy. Right. And we can tear apart that story all we want. You know, the dude did just basically rob the fucking bank, give away all the money to the poor, and sat there for 4 hours with a sitting army talking shit to the leaders of the entire city.
Right.
I don't know, Pat, if someone did that to your church, you'd probably fucking kill him too.
I'd be pretty mad.
Yeah. You'd be mad.
Yeah.
You'd be mad. Right. And so this idea that my point is, but God knew all that and stepped into human history.
Right.
For the express purpose of salvation. And that looks like collective liberation. That looked like liberation to the people of Jerusalem. They thought it was liberation. They showed up ready to burn down the temple if they had to.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that God has a really fucked up sense of humor and was like, no, you can do the opposite of that. And it's going to take you 2,000 years to figure that shit out. And maybe I'll come back.
Right.
You guys were a real fucking bummer last time.
It was no fun. It was no fun.
It was no fun. Right. And then we killed all the upper management just to really rub it in.
Yeah.
We killed your district manager too in Syria. Fuck him. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? Right. And so, but God still sends people. God still sends us. God still sends the people. Right. And so in that sense, grace will always be here. In that sense, the hope for this country here, the hope for your country, the hope for our world relies in us coming together as people. And it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm sure it's the same way in your church. You know, the 250 people who could absolutely change that church, but like half of you don't get along.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's time for us to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's time to figure it out. If it wasn't now, when?
Well, I think that's why I couldn't put your book down. Like, I mean, I think the thing is that those of us who are in the institution and are frustrated by it, we're hungry for a word of grace and a reminder of this God who steps into human history in very unusual times and places. And you know, I need to be reminded that, you know, and I think you're right. God still is stepping in the words of people like yourself, Lenny. I mean, you are a prophetic voice right now in America. You're a prophetic voice for us here in Canada too. We face these same issues. You know, they manifest themselves in nuanced different ways, but the deleterious effect of the institutional church, see, I use it right there, but remains the same for both. So
and it's a larger conversation about, and I wrote about this at the New Year. I don't think that this is terrible news to give people, but I don't think the church is God's chosen vessel on earth anymore.
No.
I think we've lost.
That's a whole other
this year.
podcast right there. We got
we need a whole other podcast.
Yeah. We'll save that one to the next
save
podcast.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's good. Lenny, just before we let you go here, one thing we're just asking all of our guests quickly at the end of our podcast is Black History Month this month.
Yeah.
And we're asking all our guests to maybe share one of their heroes or influencers. Who do you think of? Who do you give thanks for this month?
Uncle Jimmy, James Baldwin. I mean,
Yeah.
Uncle Jimmy is really, I mean, Black, there's not a lot of Black queer literature heroes for me to like, you know, very openly.
Yeah.
And James was queer. He was fucking everyone. God bless him. I'm one of those people. Listen, I know Malcolm was queer and he was a sex worker when he was younger. And we know that Martin, anyway, I'm just saying it's very possible that Jimmy made out with both of them. And that makes my heart fucking sore.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I don't know. I'd be like, should I make out with Dr. King right now? I'm going to make out with Dr. King. and I'm hoping Jimmy had that moment in his life where he was like, they were getting really intimate. And he's like, should I lean in and kiss Dr. King right now? Because I would have went for it. I don't know what Jimmy did.
Yeah.
I've been upset. I'm working on a third book now because I'm just crazy.
Yeah.
And it's about hip hop and music.
Nice.
Iain, good eye.
I would love to see it. Love to read it.
We're gonna have you back. We're gonna have you back for that, Lenny.
Yeah, and so I'm writing that one this year, but it sparked from this idea. I don't know if you ever heard James Baldwin's "The Struggle of the Artist," and he gives this talk in New York City Community Church by Columbia, and I could imagine the crowd by Columbia that fucking night, right? You know, like a couple of beatniks, a bunch of English majors, a few fucking poli-sci white dudes who've come to argue with fucking James, and like, you know, randomly Malcolm and other people would show up, Norzeel Hurston, and you know, so weird fucking scene, right? Already a weird scene. And you know, and he starts in full James mode, which I love. As someone who used to eat out of trash cans, people are like, wow, you have an ego. I'm like, well, go sleep on the streets for 14 years and you'll celebrate every fucking thing that happens to you too. So you can fuck all the way off. Right? Like, I'm sorry. It's just funny. Like, white people do that. They're like, well, now that you're rich, like, you know that, like, you have to make this house smaller, right? To be ecologically. You know, you can't buy that flashy car anymore, right?
No,
right? You can't do that. That's so wrong. It's funny. It's like when BIPOC people start moving up in the world, everyone's like, well, that's just, we don't do that anymore. Oh, okay, good.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks.
I didn't know that.
Thanks for
the reminder.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah. But you know, but you know, Jimmy says, right? He says, I would never come before you in the position of a complainant. I write because I must write. And so that's how he starts the talk. And people are there to listen to him talk about the struggle of the artist. And he talks about, you know, so much, but then he gets to this thing where he talks about the report of poets. And by poets, he means all artists. And what he says is that at the end of great empires, when they fall, you can only trust the report of poets. The politicians, priests, union leaders, no one understands what's happening. And he framed his argument in this really eloquent way. He's like, we know of Rome because of Homer.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've just been obsessed with that idea and who are the poets of the 21st century, and that's and that's hip hop artists. But you know, Uncle Jimmy, hand down, James Baldwin fulfilled the role that I hope that I fulfill in some small way in the ecosystem, is that I'm just a witness. I'm just here to report what I see.
And folks, if you read Dear Church, a love letter from a Black preacher to the Whitest Church in America, or The United States of Grace, which is coming out on May the 18th. Pre-order it now.
Pre-orders are huge, guys. That's how I hit the list. So if you are listening and you're like, take a $22 risk on me, America. I know it's a little bit more for you guys.
It's probably $28, I think, for us, but get on it and get that book, because you will see that Lenny quotes James Baldwin as well, so you can tell he's got that love affair there, and total respect for Uncle Jimmy. I like that you call him Uncle Jimmy.
Oh man, there's just not a lot of spiritual parents for queer Black writers, and it's one of the few.
You are becoming that for a bunch of people out there right now. And that's
I hope so.
No, you are, and that's
Oh, yeah, you
important
are.
work you're doing,
Yeah, I
man.
can tell.
It's incredible.
Hey, Lenny,
Oh,
thank you
thank you so much.
for the gift of your time today, man. We know you got a lot going on, and to hang out with us three goobers up here in
No,
Canada.
you guys
We
are great.
appreciate
I
that.
looked at your
You're doing-
lineup. I don't know how many listeners you got, but you've had like all the big ones. What's
Yeah, we're
going
getting
on?
the
You've
big
had
ones.
like some.
Yeah.
You guys are nailing it. You had Nadia a little bit ago. You've
Yeah.
had some other like theologians I know.
Yeah.
You've had some
Yeah.
pastors. I looked at your list. I was like, okay,
Cool.
respect.
Wow.
Wow, that was. I say, if I had hair,
It'd
it
be
would
gone.
be white back like that.
That is a sobering wake up call to all of us.
It is.
That was
big time,
incredible.
and,
Yeah.
That was fantastic. Love Lenny. I can't wait to get into his book, and I'll be following him a lot more. We need to hear that. I think the church needs to hear that. We all need to hear that. It's important.
Yeah,
Important.
amen,
So,
buddy. He's
hey, thanks to Lenny for his time. We really appreciate that, and look forward to pre-ordering that book. Okay, make sure
Yeah.
we
It's
take
called
care
the
of that.
United States of Grace, and it's
United States
available
of
on
Grace.
May the 18th, but you can pre-order it now.
Hey, thanks to our sponsors again before we take off, to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation, London, Middlesex, both family owned and operated, to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, locally owned, locally operated, locally loved, and our good friends at Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today. That's a wrap. We'll be back next week with two guests, one of which I'm really looking for. I'm looking forward to seeing both of them, but one of which is a gentleman that I've been reading for a while, since I think it was a priest at my ordination gave me a book by him and signed it. I can't remember the priest's name, Revy something. But anyway, since I got that, Brian,
I know the
McLaren's
guy,
gonna
I
be-
think.
Yeah, I know that guy. Brian McLaren will be on, and
Yep.
we've got some others coming up, so we look forward to that. Guys,
Yeah.
thanks very much. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's.
And I'm Kevin George from St. Aidan's Church.
And my name is Iain. Oh, excuse me. My name is Iain.
And he has indigestion.
Bless you, Iain. Bless you, Iain. You have now been shivened.
You've been shriven. You are so good looking.
Shriven. Yeah, that's right. Hey, Kevin, don't forget, buddy, always look both ways.
Before you cross the street.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Iain, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!